In a forgotten corner of northern Ghana, where roads were made of dust and the nearest clinic was a 2-day walk away, a girl named Amina was born. Her village, called Oduro, had no electricity, no clean water, and certainly no health care. When people got sick, they prayed. When they got worse, they waited. Sometimes waiting was all they could do. When Amina was just 10, her mother died of an infection after childbirth, one that could have been prevented with antibiotics. 2 years later, her father succumbed to malaria. He had tried to walk to the city for treatment, but collapsed halfway. He never made it. Amina buried both of them behind the old baobab tree and made a silent promise to the earth. No one should die waiting. But she was just a child. She had no medical training, no resources, and no idea where to start. All she had was a notebook, a radio, and an unshakable will. She began by listening to a solar-powered radio her father had once traded for a goat. Amina would tune in every evening to health programs broadcast from the capital. She wrote everything down: symptoms, remedies, what clean water meant, how germs spread. At 14, she convinced the village chief to let her set up a health corner in the old chicken coop. She painted the inside white, using homemade paint from clay and ash. She gathered herbs, stored rainwater, and offered help with fevers, cuts, and childbirth. At first, people laughed. Then, they started coming. But she wanted more than herbs and instinct. So she walked 4 hours every Saturday to a neighboring village that had a school. She asked for old textbooks, anything about biology, nursing, or first aid. She copied diagrams, memorized terms. She began teaching kids about washing hands, treating mosquito bites, and boiling water. Knowledge first, then medicine. At 16, something incredible happened. A Dutch backpacker named Lars had fallen off his motorbike near Oduro. Amina was the one who found him, unconscious and bleeding. She cleaned his wound, stabilized him with improvised bandages, and stayed by his side for 48 hours until he could be moved. When Lars recovered, he was stunned. "You did all this with nothing?" he asked. Amina simply said, "I did what I had to." Lars took her photo. He wrote a blog post about her. Then a journalist picked up the story. Then a health NGO. And suddenly, strangers from across the world started asking, "How can we help?" Donations trickled in. First, enough to buy real medical supplies. Then a generator. Then solar panels. Within a year, Amina's chicken coop clinic had morphine, bandages, IV fluids, a real roof, and a small staff of volunteers. But she wasn't done. At 18, Amina applied for and received a scholarship to study community health in Accra. It was her first time leaving the village. The city overwhelmed her. Skyscrapers, traffic, electricity on demand. She cried her first night, not because she was scared, but because her people still lived in the dark. She graduated top of her class, refused job offers from private hospitals. She had already made a promise, and the baobab tree still waited. Amina returned home at 22 with plans, real blueprints. She used her savings and donations to build a modest hospital on land donated by the village elders. It had 10 beds, a delivery room, a small pharmacy, and a waiting bench made from the same wood her father once carved. People came from miles around. Mothers brought babies. Fathers brought hope. Some walked 12 hours just to be seen. And they were, because of her.
At 23, Amina became the youngest certified health director in her district. She didn't wear a white coat. She wore her mother's old headscarf, and people said it gave her strength. She walked the halls of the hospital barefoot most days, so patients felt she was one of them, because she was. She recruited 2 retired nurses, a midwife who had lost her own daughter during labor years before, and a young man who had once studied agriculture but now wanted to help. Amina trained them all, not just in medical care, but in compassion. She taught them to hold hands before giving injections, to say the names of patients slowly and respectfully, to explain, not just prescribe. They've been ignored their whole lives, she'd say. We're not here to fix people. We're here to remind them they matter. Still, challenges came hard and fast. One week, they ran out of saline. Another, the generator failed during surgery. Amina slept in the hallway for 3 nights, using her body heat to keep a newborn alive. When cholera broke out in a neighboring region, Amina rode her motorbike through mud and rain, delivering water purification tablets and megaphones. She became a symbol, but not everyone loved her. Local politicians questioned why so much foreign attention was focused on a barefoot woman with no political ties. They accused her of creating dependency. One even tried to shut down the hospital, citing improper permits. Amina responded with a press conference, her first ever. With shaky hands but fierce eyes, she said, "If saving lives is illegal, then arrest me. But do it in front of the women who now hold their babies. Do it in front of the fathers who buried their sons before I came." The video was shared over 10 million times. The politician backed off. By 26, her hospital had received international accreditation. Medical students from Europe applied to intern there. Amina started a mobile clinic program, visiting remote villages with vaccines, prenatal care, and basic education. But it wasn't just medicine. She planted gardens around the hospital so children waiting for treatment could play and learn. She turned the waiting area into a small library. One wall read, "This is not just a place for healing the body, but for remembering your worth." At 28, she was invited to speak at the United Nations. She wore a simple green dress, refused makeup, spoke slowly in accented English, and when asked what made her keep going, she said, "My parents died waiting. I want the next child to live knowing someone was waiting for them." Her words brought the room to silence and then to tears. Today, Amina's hospital is known across Africa as the House of Dignity. It has expanded to include a surgical wing, a maternity center, and the continent's first rural mental health unit funded entirely by public donations. She still sleeps under a mosquito net, still starts her day by boiling water and walking the halls before sunrise, still wears her mother's scarf, and sometimes, when a patient is discharged, she walks them to the baobab tree, the same one that watched her bury everything once lost. She touches its bark and says, "This was where I made my first promise. You can make one too." Because Amina never built a hospital just to treat sickness. She built it to prove that hope,
even in the most abandoned place on earth, can take root and save lives.